You talk about, and we always look at EPDs and those kind of things, and you talk about milk production not being an asset. And I want you to expound a little bit on the fact that high milk production is something that you sort of frown on. Is that correct?
Did you catch that?
High milk production is what?
Something that you're not looking for in the maternity traits in cows?
Yeah.
Can you expound on that?
I
just a
can.
little bit? Thank you.
I think milk production is anti-maternal. Now, a certain amount of milk is needed, okay? A calf has to get started in life. It needs to start to develop an immune system, et cetera. It needs to grow, it needs to have vitality, and it takes a certain amount of milk to do that. But I think we have pushed way, way beyond. And EPDs work. The Holstein breed doesn't call them EPDs, but they selected for milk, lots of milk, and got it. But they got, almost everything else they got were undesirable. Terrible fertility, terrible health, just a lot of problems. And I think we've seen the same thing as we selected for more milk and growth in cattle. The EPDs worked. The EPDs is what gave us more growth, more milk. But we undid a lot of other things we were trying to do. Fertility in many breeds has diminished. As I've gone around as a speaker, people come and ask me, why am I not getting cows bred like I used to? They used to breed in the 90s all the time. I'm having trouble getting them to breed even in the 80s today. And you track what they are. What milk EPDs do you have in the bulls you're buying? What are the yearling weight EPDs, the growth EPDs in the bulls you're buying? How much, what was the breed makeup of your cows 15 years ago when you got good breed up rates, and what is it today? And almost all the time it boils down to too much milk, too much growth, and not enough heterosis. And so, and the conversion of grass to milk to pounds of calf is a poor conversion, terrible conversion, in fact, after you pass the threshold of what a calf just needs to be a good surviving calf. I wish I could tell you what I think is the optimum EPD. On an Angus basis, since those are most popular, I'm guessing it's in the teens. And I'm strongly of the opinion that it's not in the 30s and probably not even in the 20s. But I don't know. But anyway, those are the reasons I want less milk. You just run more cows if they don't give so much milk, and the conversion is just not good.
I'd just add to that the age at which a calf transitions from being predominantly milk dependent to forage dependent is only about 90 days. So milk production prior to 90 days of age is what matters. And a cow generally hits peak lactation somewhere between 45 and 70 days. And so it's going to start falling off. Ideally, you want it to start falling off of that because the calf is more dependent on grazed forage at 91 days of age than it is on 89 days of age.
I'd add one other thing to that. I'm strongly of the opinion, and Greg talked about water quality, that I want that calf to have access to good drinking water at a very young time in life. I've gone to paddocks, pastures, where the water tank is so high the calf could no way reach the water. It's dependent strictly on mama's milk for its fluid intake. I want that calf drinking water as early as it can, and if it can drink water beside mama, it's going to start grazing beside mama a lot quicker. And I think that transition is really important.
When you think about marketing and the amount of grass a cow will eat over the winter, does it pay to preg check cows as opposed to just selling the ones that don't calve?
Okay. That's not always an easy question. If you're preg checking in the fall, and the fall market for an open cow is not a very good market, then you may have some decisions to make. How much feed do you have available, and would you rather spend it on a cow that you know is going to have a calf or one that's not going to have a calf? But if you have enough feed available that it doesn't matter a lot, you can go to spring and sell a cow in a lot better market and at a heavier weight and probably have some advantage. So I don't argue a lot with people who do not preg check if their pregnancy rates are historically good and they know it. If you have any reason to doubt that that pregnancy rate is good, I would be preg checking those cows to know it. I know a few people that preg check yearlings and 2-year-olds, and that's about it. And if those preg rates are what they expected, they don't preg the cows until spring, and after calving, they just sort off the dry cows. Whether she's dry because she lost a calf, slipped a calf during winter, or didn't get pregnant in the first place, they don't care. They just sell the dry cows. So it's a combination. You just have to think your way through it and put some numbers to your marketing situation and the feed situation.
I'm going to have Greg comment on this also, and it has to do with how is it that you market your cull cows?
One of the nice tools about having a grass-fed label is, a fat cow on grass ground into hamburger, or even if, we'll even cut a ribeye out of them. We sell cull cows as grass-finished beef. And, we all talk about getting a steer finished at 24 months on grass. Folks, the best one I've ever ate was an 11-year-old cow. When they get a little age on them, they actually have more flavor. And if they're fat and the cow doesn't have a lot of connective tissue in that ribeye, by God, she's going to be a good eating experience. So we always go in and cut a ribeye out of a cow after it's hung for 7 or 8 days, and we grill it. And if it's tender, we'll cut the thing up like a steer. So don't automatically assume because she's a cull cow that she's just hamburger. She might be an absolutely excellent eating experience.
And my experience with the old cows like that is 60 days after weaning is enough to really put a good finish. Once you take that calf off that cow, if she's got any decent feed at all, she fattens up in a hurry, and you can take a moderately thin open cow and turn her into high-quality beef in 60 days.
Okay, my question has to do with multi-species grazing, because you alluded to doing that, Greg, but you didn't talk about, do you have a plan? I'm sure you have a plan with your grazing. Do you follow them? Do you have the sheep following the cattle? Are they with the cattle? When do the birds come in? When do the pigs come in? How do you do that?
Yeah, first of all, we found that in our rotation, the cattle go first because sheep can foul a lot of grass. It's not that they eat a lot of grass, they just walk on it. And our cows are not very happy following sheep. And so if you look at the smaller mouth on a sheep, and they eat different. A sheep is more of a broadleaf. So our cattle will turn their noses up at like multiflorous bushes, thorn trees, ironweed, lamb's quarter, goldenrod, some of these nasty weeds that cows won't touch. The sheep actually make a good diet on those. So the sheep can follow behind cows much better. In the wintertime, as we move through the farm, especially in our timbered areas, we're creating silvopasture. The cows go first. We graze off the forage, and then we try and bring some carbon into those woody areas, maybe unrolled hay. Behind that is the pigs. And the pigs will roll that hay around, they'll go through the cow manure, they'll bust it around, and they're just foragers. The hogs are really an intricate part. They're scavengers. They'll eat anything that moves. I think the hogs, folks, there's a really good market out here for pastured hogs, breeding stock. Y'all realize, what a Berkshire breeding or a Berkshire feeder pig sells for today? Anybody want to guess? $160. Now, if you can save 7 pigs out of that sow twice a year, that's $2,000 just for one sow. You're just selling breeding stock. So, you know, look at some of these markets out there. They're out there, and these woods pigs, pasture pigs, whatever you want to call them, it's a hot market. The pork is just unbelievable. If you ever ate it, you'd never go back to the store and buy any of that stuff in the store. It's not the same product. The chickens follow the cattle just on one farm because we can't keep up with our herd. I mean, our herd is moving so fast over so many farms. We've got 575 chickens and 2 big schooner houses that are laying chickens. You just can't keep up. And so, but I'll tell you, the chickens are an intricate part of our farm now. Where you move those chickens around, you really have a ton of fertilizer going on your soil. And if you've got a farm that's kind of, you might say starting from scratch, boy, chickens can really give you a jump start. So we're really excited about the chickens. So it's usually cattle, the sheep, and the pigs, and then the chickens. That's kind of our rotation.
Just adding on to that, we have quite a few clients who run pasture layers, and kind of the stocking rate number that I get, and I don't know what you figured, Greg, but they figure they need 2 hens per adult bovine to scratch out the manure. I mean, if you're following the cattle fairly tight, 2 hens per adult, you know, anything bigger than a yearling, so replacement heifers, big stockers that you're grazing, cows, they figure 2 hens per bovine. Is that about what you?
Yeah, we're pretty close to that. One of the things we found, we use netting on the hens. We've got 8 100-foot nettings. And so we're fencing a huge area. And those chickens have access to that whole area, but those houses are moved. So when we have to set up the netting, they're moved every day, that house is, within the netting. Most of your manure from the chickens are in the house, where they're laying their eggs and where they're roosting at. And so we're moving that 4 times within that netting. We've got a guard dog now that's trained. It lives in the netting with the chickens, and he's actually proved himself. He's not even a year old yet, but he hasn't killed a chicken now for 4 months. So, yeah. Folks, that's the work in chickens, is setting up that darn netting. And so we're looking at now, we're going to give him another month, but he's really coming on. He killed his first possum 2 weeks ago, and possum got in the netting. He got under it and was coming in to kill the chickens. And he nailed that possum. So he's a big dog. We're excited about it. We're going to take the netting down. When you take the netting down, that eliminates probably 70% of the labor. And that dog is now bonded onto those chickens, so we can cover a wider area and we can move the chickens faster with 70% less labor. And that dog thinks he's a chicken. He really does. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Just one dog?
Yeah, one dog. And folks, to bond a dog onto chickens, you've got to get them right off the mother when they're weaned. Don't let them get very big. They need to be about the size of a chicken, about 5 weeks old. Just the baby teeth are in. They're on hard dog feed, okay? And get them in there. Don't let them get, up here. They're going to manhandle your chickens. But when they're a little puppy, then it helps to have some roosters in there. The roosters don't tolerate a lot of that. We've got some big roosters. Why do we run roosters with the hens? I can tell you why. First of all, the puppy, but also the aerial predators that come over the chickens, hawks, owls, buzzards, any big bird that flies over the top of those roosters are flying for that chicken house. I mean, they do. They take off running. Every hen in the yard is right behind them. They're going in those houses. So the roosters really, they're an intricate part of the chicken on pasture deal.
What breed of dog?
The breed of dog that we're using is a Kangal. He is, they come from Turkey. And there are some Kangal breeders in the United States. He's half Marima and half Kangal. He's a big dog. When he gets mature, he's probably going to be about 175. Yeah, he's a big dude. I like for our sheep, we run a Marima, a 1/2 Marima, a quarter Anatolian Shepherd, and a quarter Pyrenees. I don't like running pure Pyrenees, because the pure Pyrenees, they'll be on your neighbor's porch, they'll be on your other neighbor's porch, they'll be in town, and what they do is they spread their territory. They pee on the corners of your farm to mark their territory, and the next day they're peeing on your neighbor's corners, the next day they're peeing in Bismarck's corner or whatever. They just keep expanding their range, and they get killed. They get killed. They get hit on the road or somebody shoots them. So the dog doesn't do you any good if it's not with your sheep. So that Marima, that 1/2 Marima in there, I'm telling you folks, they think they're a sheep. They lay down in the middle of the sheep. Anything comes around, they bark, and they'll run coyotes off, but they don't kill the coyotes, they just bark at them. And I tell people, you don't really want a dog that'll run a coyote clear off your farm, because now you've left your sheep unprotected. You just want them to bark. And a dog that barks a lot ferociously, the coyote's going to go somewhere else. He's not going to kill your sheep. So, yeah.
I'll just ask. When a guy's getting started, when he wants to form his grazing herd, can he take his existing herd and make them grass-fed genetics, or is he better off to get rid of those cows and bring those type of genetics in?
I'll say, I'm going to pass this on down. I'll give you my 2 cents on that. I think you ought to start with what you've got and get the right size bull. Go around and try and find a smaller frame bull. Pick out the color you want, black, yellow, red, whatever, and keep those daughters out of that cross. And in several years, you'll have the right size cattle. I don't think you ought to sell your cows, because first of all, you've kind of got the ones that, the stupid high-headed ones, hopefully those are out of your herd. You've got cows that are kind of adapted to your farm and you. And why do you want to go and bring a bunch of stuff in that you don't know anything about? So I would rather, a bull has a huge imprint. You can get a really good smaller frame bull, and man, he can really stamp those cows, okay? It's a lot cheaper. I mean, these grass genetic cows today, folks, they're expensive. I'm talking these smaller frame cows. If you can find them, you're going to pay a premium for them. You can grow them from the cows you have by getting the right size bull. That's my 2 cents.
I'd largely echo that, and especially what Greg said. It's really hard to find for sale, a good set of grass-based cows, because everybody wants them, and most of the people who have good grass-based genetics are also implementing better grazing management. They're increasing their carrying capacity, so they're in expansion mode. There's going to come a time when the availability is greater. As far as the bulls go, what I've seen is, like, if you've got 6 frame cows now, the 1,400 plus cows, and you put a frame score 2 bull on them, the daughters are going to be approximately 100 to 150 pounds lighter than what their moms were. So if you're trying to come from a 1,400 pound cow down to a 1,000 pound cow, it's going to take, like 3 generations to get down there. If you're transitioning like that, I'm an advocate of keeping every heifer and exposing every heifer. We talked about that a bit this morning, no longer than 30 days. Some people do it just for a single cycle, and the ones that get bred are the ones that you keep. If you do it for longer than 30 days and you get a really good number of heifers bred, you're going to make that transition a whole lot faster, because you can start selling off a higher percentage of your great big cows, and guess what? You have plenty of neighbors who want to buy those great big cows.
Yeah, I'd echo the same thing. I just believe start from where you are. And the open heifers, if you breed for 30 days, the open heifers are good merchandise. If you sell them or if you want to make, they're great grass finishers. That heifer's open, she's just part of the grass-fed program. And that same thing applies to a heiferette, a 2-year-old that loses her calf at calving time. Most people slip them right into the grass-fed mode. And, I don't know about the availability of grass-fed cows because while it's a very small part of the overall beef business, it's growing very rapidly. And so most of the people I know that have developed that grass-fed market, they're expanding as fast as they can expand because the market's there to absorb the cattle.
I want to touch one more point, and that was a great question. It brings up this, and I get this question every day because people are ringing my phone off the wall for heifers. I'm like, I'm sorry. But I tell them, look, if you can go out and add value, let's just say you don't have anything, you're just starting out. You've got a farm, you want to stock it with some cattle, and your resources are limited. Go out and buy something you can add value to. What I mean by that, I mean something really ugly, like a Corriente cow. I'm serious. I got a guy that's doing it in Kentucky. He bought a bunch of Corriente roping cows. I think he gave, I don't know, it was $280 for them. And he put a really nice grass genetic bull on them. Guess what he got? No horns. He got a solid red calf with a calf with an ass on it in one cross. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, so what did he do? He added value. He got something better than what he started with. You can't lose if you start out with crap and add value to it, just by putting a decent bull on it. You can't really lose money. I have the Hopping brothers in Oklahoma, really sharp cattlemen, and they took Dexter. They had a bunch of Dexter cows. They got them for like $300, $400. These little Dexters, and they put a Charolais bull on them, a smaller frame Charolais bull. I'm like, man, I bet you killed the heck out of, trying to pull the calf. No, he said those Dexters just downsized that calf, and they sold those calves that I think the long yearlings they were 800 pounds. They topped the market. Crossbred calves. So if you can get cows that are somebody nobody wants, and these Corrientes, they're ugly. I mean, they are. They're ugly cows. But you can put a good bull on them, guess what? You're adding value. So if I was a young man starting out, man, I'd be looking at Longhorns, Corrientes, or whatever. We got a friend in Utah that did that with Longhorns, with our South Pole bulls. He's topping the market now. And he was giving his calves away.
I've got to speak up for Corrientes. They never get sick and they always get pregnant. And you can run 5 of them where you'll run 3 conventional cows. And if you can add that, I mean, I wish every cow that I had anything to do with was a quarter Corriente at least. So upgrading them, you can make something pretty darn good. They bring some traits to the party that are good. They are ugly, but they bring some traits to the breeding party that are pretty darn good.
I was in a big herd in Texas, and all this guy had was prickly pear. Them dang Corrientes had figured out how to eat prickly pear. And they all had calves on them. They were all good shape. I'm like, my cows would have starved to death on that farm. But those things had made a living, so they're very hardy animals. We'll get off of that.
Any others?
Okay.
When it comes to winter stockpile, is there anything specific you do to have quality grass left in the winter to graze?
Okay. If you are in an environment where you can do twice over grazing, if you do a early season grazing and then allow the grass to recover, that's almost always going to be higher quality grass than a full season's growth. That's certainly one thing you can do. Depending on what kind of pasture you have out there and where on the landscape it is, you might have some fields that just have species better suited for winter grazing than other areas. So you'd focus on using those fields. If you're in a mixed farming operation, growing some annuals for winter feed, that's almost always going to be higher quality than your stockpiled perennials. So those are just a few ideas.
One of the things that we've kind of changed up on our winter stockpile grazing, and I'm talking about cool season grasses here, primarily fescue, it stockpiles real well. I used to go in and try and get all that stockpile on my first rotation across our farms. See, we go across the whole farm in the wintertime. We don't just set off a back 40 for stockpiling. We stockpile the entire farm. Now, not all of it's going to be stockpiled to the height that maybe with the longest rest period has had, but there's something there to graze. So what we do is we go around the whole entire farm. We just take the tops off in the first rotation through the winter. And that'll get us to about February 1st. And then from February up until March, we'll come back and we'll take another pass. So the candy's been taken on that first pass, but that's our coldest weather, December, January. So they need better, higher quality forage. That second pass across the farm in the wintertime, we come back and take a little bit more, another third, but we're leaving a third of the plant intact. And we give them a bigger area. You got to give them a bigger area. So we're making up for quality with quantity. We're giving them more of it. And folks, the cows do better on that than they do on our hay. It's pretty tough to put up good hay in Missouri. We get a lot. We can get a lot of rain. We didn't this year, and the hay's always too mature when it's baled. Then we get hot, humid weather. It gets mold in it because we can't get it dry.
If you are seeding cropland down to perennial pasture up here, I think probably most places in North Dakota you can grow meadow brome grass. Yeah, meadow brome is almost as good as tall fescue for winter stockpile feed. You're not going to be, maybe in the very southeast corner of North Dakota, you might grow fescue down there, but majority of the state, tall fescue is not going to grow. So meadow brome is a real nice option for this part of the country.
Okay, we've got time for one question, and then we'll probably mosey on over to the social, and I would encourage everyone, they will be available there to discuss if anyone has more questions. And
right down here in front.
Right in front. Final question.
Greg, could you talk a little bit about fencing systems for your sheep? What do you do differently?
That's a great question. Our fencing for our sheep, when I set up the fencing on our sheep, I was still working in town and running I had 3 herds of cattle, moving them twice a day, and I'm like, I can't move the sheep at that time twice. I just couldn't do it. So I set up my paddocks. I had 16 permanent paddocks, and all those sheep paddocks had 4 wires on all 4 sides, high tensile electric. The bottom one's the ground. The top 3 are hot. The spacing's much closer, so the sheep can't duck through it. You gotta have a ground wire with sheep, it seems like, if you're gonna use high tensile. But then we graduated from that. In the last 2 years, we started strip grazing, just rotating with polywire within those paddocks. Oh my gosh, that's been a boom for us. So to train the sheep to polywire, we started with 3 wires, because we just started strip grazing at the water source, pie shape, rectangles, whatever. Sheep hate water, and most of our water's ponds. And so we would stick a post out in the pond, hook a wire on it, and take off to the far end of the paddock and make it hot. The sheep won't go in the water, so that was a dead-end source so they could get water. And we did 3 wires for about 3 months, and we went down to 2 wires, now we're down to 1. So we're actually able to keep our sheep in with 1 poly braid. Now that poly braid's got 10,000 volts in it. And the dogs stay in, the sheep stay in, but the critical part to sheep or pigs is don't let them get bored. Don't let them run out of food. There ought to be something there to eat. So watch your forage really closely. If the sheep are getting it ate down a little bit and they're running out of weeds, we watch the weeds. I mean, the ironweed, they've stripped the ironweed off, boy, we got to get them. we got to move them. And we're moving our sheep from a day to every day and a half. And by moving your sheep on a fresh paddock, every day, day and a half, they're so much more healthy. They're just more healthy. But it does take, it takes polybraid. I like polybraid. There's a difference, folks, between polywire and polybraid. Polywire is twisted. It's got 6 steel filaments in it. The polybraid has 9, and it's it's more, they can see it better. It's a little bit bigger diameter. And your post spacing. So we use the step ends. You've got to put your post spacing closer for sheep. Cattle, I can go 60 feet. But on sheep, you've got to get those posts about, well, if it's flat, you might go 20 feet. If you go much more than that, that sheep's going to try it. And once a sheep learns to go underneath the wire, you might as well either sell that sheep or eat her, shoot her. If you let them keep doing that, they'll train the whole flock within 2 or 3 days. And now you got a bunch of finch jumpers. But yeah, we like this rotation because the sheep, they have campsites, moving them all the time, better animal performance. And in a drought, well, you can really tighten them up. And I'm glad you asked it. People say you can't build soil with sheep. They're too small. Oh, yes, you can. If you have long, narrow rectangles, those darn sheep just walking back and forth, they will tread it on the ground. And boy, you talk about some good soil. That'll come back. You come back in 80, 90 days. That's some of our best forage on our farm is our sheep pastures. And they say you can't grow clover with sheep. They'll graze it out of your pasture. No, they won't. Not if you don't leave them there. Some of our best pastures with clovers are the sheep pastures, believe it or not. So, yeah, we love the sheep. They're an intricate part of our operation, and, yeah.
Folks, we're going to draw to an end at this point, but I think we should give them a well-deserved hand.